Good afternoon and welcome to this afternoon's webinar, Higher Education Leadership in a Time of Crisis. My name is Lynette DeCary and I'm Assistant Vice President for Analytical Services and Institutional Research here at Boston University. A quick housekeeping note for you. Just note that this webinar is being recorded and we will make that recording available to you at BU Wheelock YouTube channel after the webinar is over. In today's webinar, we're going to be joined by Mary Churchill and BU Wheelock Dean David Chard to discuss their new book, When Colleges Close, Leading in the Time of Crisis. This book outlines the closing of the 130-year-old Wheelock College and its subsequent merger with Boston University to create the Wheelock College for Education and Human Development, or BU Wheelock for short. I'll be starting the fireside chat, although in New England it's very warm, so fireside may not be so good, but I'll be starting this chat with a series of questions and then we will open up questions from the listeners. You can ask your question in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. And you can also feel free to place any comments that you'd like in the chat box. It's my pleasure to introduce my colleagues. First, we have David Chard, who is Dean of Boston University's Wheelock College of Education and Human Development. David came to BU Wheelock as president of Wheelock College prior to the merger with Boston University. And before that, he was dean of the Annette Caldwell Simmons School of Education and Human Development at Southern Methodist University. Welcome, David.
Thanks, Lynette. Great to be here.
We also have Mary Churchill, who is Associate Dean for Strategic Initiatives and Community Engagement at BU Wheelock, while also juggling the full-time job as Chief of Policy and Planning for the City of Boston right now. Prior to these roles, she was the Vice President for Academic Affairs at Wheelock College. Welcome, Mary.
Thank you, Lynette. Great to be here.
Let's just dive in. So according to the website Higher Ed Dive, there have been 38 closures or mergers of higher education institutions between 2018 and present. In the conferences I've attended, the BU Wheelock merger has been considered an example of a positive merger. What do you both see as the key factors for success in a merger situation?
David, do you want to start?
Well, there are so many dimensions to this question, Lynette. And I would start by saying, in part, no one ever chooses to merge. These are complicated decisions that take time to make and to implement, and to say that something is successful when there is tremendous pain and regret on the part of people involved in the process. I think that the truth is we did the best we could under the circumstances. That's how I would describe it. So, and what helps us get there, I think, is rational decision-making, being well-informed about the context in which you're making those decisions, having lots of involvement of those who are in decision-making roles, as much transparency as the law and good decision-making allows. Yeah, I'll stop. I'm sure Mary has things she would add to that list.
Yeah, well, and I will say, kind of amplifying some of what you just said, David, no one wants to close an institution, right? And I think that I'm glad you used the word positive, right? Because it's tricky to talk about it as a success story, which I know a lot of the higher ed media has. And sure, in some ways it is, when you look at it from a larger kind of point of view, but from the point of view of the institution that's closing, it is a death of sorts, right? And so it was, I think, part of what David and I both had in mind as we approached this was a real sensitivity to that, right? And to the fact that this was going to be a highly emotional space for folks who had long histories with Wheelock, and meeting people where they were in multiple ways was really important. And I think it was different for every set of stakeholders, students, faculty, staff, alumni, recent alumni versus long-term alumni, and everybody had a different emotional journey that was on a different trajectory, and that was you couldn't be emotionally sensitive enough, right? Like there it was our capacity for that, I think for both of us was really tapped. At the end of the day, we were like, oh my God, we have to do this again tomorrow, right? And so I think that side of it was really challenging. The positive side is what we were able to then take forward into BU. And I think David and I are both value a graceful and sensitive closure and transition process for individuals and for institutions. And I think that came through in the process. And so I think that was positive, putting students at the center of everything we did and trying to remind all the different folks that we're really here for the students, and trying to make sure that we took care of them as much as possible, those who wanted to move into BU, and keep them financially whole and take care of those. And then those, I think of our athletes, David, right, who really, they came to college to be athletes as much as academics, and trying to find other small colleges where they could fit in and continue that identity. And so I think, I don't know about you, David, I mean, I know this is true, but I won't speak for you. I learned so much about higher ed during that year, and really the different value that a type of institution like Wheelock brings and continues to bring in some other spaces, right? And brought to all the individuals who were involved. And so I think that open communication, a level of sensitivity, centering students and bringing us back to why we're here, those were part of the positives, and getting ahead of a messy closure, right? And so, there are messy closures, and often that happens when someone will run an institution, or some people will run an institution to its very end, and you don't have enough to take care of your people, right? And with severance packages for some people, or financial aid packages for students, and to just really do that in as sensitive a way as possible. So having a longer trajectory for a graceful closure and transfer.
And that's a nice segue to my next question. I'm a longtime BU employee, and I came in, really at the end of the book, where I became aware of what was happening with the merger between Wheelock and BU. So the book was so great to be able to give me the insight of what was going on in the years leading up to it. I was really surprised to read about how far along the Board of Trustees at Wheelock College had progressed in considering the option of merger before your arrival, David. How did the trustee assessment and their governance influence the process for you?
You're muted.
Just for those who are listening and may not have been had a chance to read the book, the Board of Trustees at Wheelock had entered into conversations with two other institutions at least a year before, or a year and a half before I was hired to be the president. And those were sort of unclear where those conversations were going. They were beginning conversations, wondering about potential partnership, sharing services that may reduce cost on Wheelock's part. And then when I was hired, they wanted to give me time to think about how we might sustain the mission as an independent college. And but the truth was, the board had already sort of set themselves up for that conversation. So in March of 17, when we returned to the conversation, when the data around enrollment as well as our finances looked as though the coming years were going to be very challenging, they weren't surprised, and they were ready to to sort of go through a process of preparing, looking at data about the future, and considering what kind of a process we might go through to find a strategic option for the future. They weren't ready to, put up the white flag and declare surrender, but they wanted us to begin a thoughtful conversation about what options might be possible, including remaining independent, but changing dramatically. And so it really was March of 17 when we started that conversation. And the board, knew that partnership, quote unquote, partnership was still an option. And they shared their thoughts with me about that. One particular board member who was at the time of the merger was an honorary board member, but had been involved at Wheelock for nearly 40 years, said to me, you have to think about the enterprise value of the institution. In 4 or 5 years, will you still look like a good partner to another institution? Or is it better to act swiftly, where you have resources now that you won't have down the road, and can do some of the things Mary described, where you can actually be deliberate about how you support different sectors of the community, rather than shuttering the doors on a Friday. And so that his whispering in my ear, I tell him this frequently, was a really important turning point in my thinking, at least, about how we should think about moving forward.
I don't really have anything to add to that one. I mean, I think that was kind of prior to my time. And I just think that I want to reiterate that the board was very thoughtful, right? And honestly, I think they were further along than either David or I were. And that's a good thing. That's where you want the board to be, right? And there is often a mismatch between where the board is in thinking about these things and considering them, and the leadership team. And that can be something that goes wrong on a campus, right? If the leader does not want to do this, but the board does, or vice versa. And we've met those folks over the years, and those are some pretty dramatic stories of those clashes. And so I think they were there and saw these multiple options definitely before I did, but probably before David as well.
Lynette, can I just add that there were people who came to Wheelock after that March 17 meeting and joined us, fully knowledgeable that we were going through this process. Mary Churchill was one of them, right? When I was interviewing for the Vice President for Academic Affairs, I told all of the candidates that the board was considering options for sustainability. And there are also other people on in the webinar today who came to Wheelock knowing that that the path forward was uncertain, and who really did an amazing job of being part of a community to help us, I think, do what you described as a successful merger. Supporting students, supporting faculty and staff, and working closely with BU leadership to make sure it happened in as best a way as possible.
It sounds like the level of transparency you had and the ability to come to agreement with the trustees really let you focus on what was important. Throughout the book, you've described a very consistent focus on both the continuation of the mission of Wheelock College and supporting the students. That was paramount. And basically carrying both of those through the assessment of your position, the negotiation with potential partners, and subsequently the actual merger. These were held, I think, above pretty much everything else in your prioritization. How do you feel these these focuses influenced the course of the merger process and the post-merger transition?
In a very sort of basic level, the Board of Trustees agreed to a set of non-negotiables, and then a set of areas where we were hoping for a certain set of outcomes. And the non-negotiables, there were primarily two of them. and then a third that was sort of, here's what we'd really like to see. The non-negotiables were that the mission of Wheelock College would be sustained, that the name of Lucy Wheelock would somehow be represented in whatever the outcome of the merger was. And then the third one was that the students, faculty, and staff of Wheelock College would be treated well in the process. We didn't define what we meant by that, but it became a way of differentiating which of the proposed partners would lead us to that outcome best. And quite honestly, BU had the resources, the leadership who prioritized that, and never wavered on it. I mean, from severance packages that were better than either BU or Wheelock offered typically for people who were not finding positions at BU, finding many positions at BU for faculty and staff to transition to from one institution to another, continuing to prioritize students really down to the point of developing an individualized program for every student who would make the transition. And when a program wasn't available at BU, in particular the bachelor's degree in social work, making sure that seniors in social work at Wheelock had a place to go to complete their BSW, and making sure that those costs were not different than what they would have paid at Wheelock. So, so that, I think the mission, the name, the identity of Wheelock, but most importantly, the people were taken care of. And I would say from the president to every member of the BU leadership, it's been one of the most remarkable parts of this story that seldom gets mentioned, is how people at BU stepped up to the challenge. And when the pandemic happened, President Brown mentioned to the university leadership group, Wheelock was a practice run for the pandemic. Like, everyone has to be engaged in how we manage this moving forward. So. I'm
trying to think if I have anything to add to that. I just think that you also asked kind of what sustained us, right? And I did mention that the focus on the students. I think there was also, for all members of Wheelock, a strong identification with the mission. So at a lot of these small institutions across the country, there's a lack of resources, right? So staff, faculty have been working for many years without the resources that they really need to support themselves and their students, or without the comparable pay that they would get at another type of institution. And so I think there were, some really amazingly committed people at Wheelock who were there for the mission, right? And I think that explaining that mission was what we also prioritized in carrying that forward, right? And Lucy Wheelock's name, right? Like that piece too, that attachment to her and her legacy in founding this institution was also something that the members of the community took very seriously and took a lot of pride in, and still do. And so I think the priorities that the board came up with, and it wasn't the campus, right? It wasn't so I think they chose the right things: people, Lucy's legacy, and the mission of the institution.
Lucy's legacy, it's a fascinating one. Wheelock College had a very, very long history and very deep roots. It was founded in 1888. Being a BU, like I said, a longtime BU employee, folks in the BU community also know that despite the university being very large with, in excess of 30,000 students, each of the 17 schools and colleges within BU has its very own unique identity and community. And the School of Education was no different. That had been founded in 1918. And and it definitely had its own sort of organization and history and community. And as an alum, I can attest to that. Can you talk in a little bit more detail about the challenges you had in trying to integrate two such established institutions that, you know, they each had their own mission, they have their own alumni and faculty and student identities?
You spoke about that as though it were the past tense.
Yeah, I was going to say that's an active conversation, Lynette.
Good point. Good point.
So the merger agreement included a transition committee of the Board of Trustees of Boston University, who the provost invites me to those meetings, I think 3 times a year, to present on where we are in the transition. That committee or task force will exist for 6 years. So the intent was that this would be carefully observed, that we would make sure that anyone who works for Boston University knows that every challenge is carefully engineered and thought through, and this merger is no different. So we are actively involved in that, Lynette. I was a faculty member at the BU School of Education in 1995, so I have a history with BU and many of the wonderful colleagues that we work with there, and I think it's been for some people challenging. For others, it's been a wonderful transition. I think there's been worries on both sides about how the two cultures would integrate. I think sometimes those worries were warranted. I think in other cases, people have found that colleagues that they now value and work closely with, and so I don't think there's one sort of a simple answer to that. I think it's a process, and as Mary said, we're actively involved in that, and trying hard to recognize the legacies that existed in both places. And the truth is, we can't lean on legacy. I mean, we actually have to think about the next college, the one that was created, not the one that we had before. And that's probably where the biggest challenge is. I would say the first couple of years, we talked a lot about, well, that's not the way we've always done it, or this is how it was done at Wheelock. I hear less of that now than we've had before. And it's also true that we now have a lot of employees who were not part of either institution historically. And so to honor their presence, we also have to think about BU Wheelock and what we want to be in the future.
Yeah, and I would add to that that I think initially there were, like in any new situation, there were perceptions of what BU was like, or perceptions of what Wheelock was like, and the colleagues. And so I think over time, as individuals got to know one another, they came to appreciate the difference of the types of institutions and the different values that kind of you think of the landscape of higher ed, that different types of institutions bring to higher ed. And the legacy Wheelock faculty, I'm thinking of kind of, especially in the new Wheelock College, bringing a very different experience, but that became, I think, really valued by the former School of Ed faculty, and vice versa, right? A kind of, what is a large R1 urban institution? What value does it bring to the landscape of higher ed, but also the smaller liberal arts, like very education, social work focused institution with this legacy? What does it bring? And starting to see that they both have incredible value, and that so did the faculty from both institutions. But yeah, I think in the beginning it was, I don't know them, I don't know what they're like, and so, but it's gotten better. And honestly, I say this all the time. We didn't say this in the book, but this amazing mix of practice and research, deep practice experience that the Wheelock faculty brought, and the kind of well-funded research experience that the BU faculty brought to this, that doesn't happen at a single institution. That only happens in a merger, because the types of faculty who are hired at the different institutions are hired very specifically. And so this combination is a unique opportunity to combine research and practice in a way that really hardly any other institution has that opportunity. So
That's fantastic.
but I am an optimist who always sees opportunity, right? So that is my basic MO in life. So
This is why you do what you do, Mary.
including City Hall, right?
So go ahead. And so, you know, and actually picking up on what you were just talking about, the human element is just a major theme in the book. And I was very pleased to see how, you know, deftly and sensitively it was covered. And I think it can't be overlooked, because, you know, the financial and the landscape realities faced by colleges in jeopardy is usually just sort of the news or the focus. From your perspective, what, if anything, did you find most useful to mitigate the challenges of the merger for the people at both Wheelock and BU? Or was there anything that surprised you, maybe?
I can start.
Yeah, please, that'd be great.
I'll start, you go, and then I'll go again.
It's good teamwork here.
Yeah, when you asked that question, the first thing I thought of were these amazing practices that each institution, you know, School of Ed had, and Wheelock had, around either pinning or candle ceremonies or the giving of plants at the beginning of the school year. So these very human-centered practices and rituals that had been handed down for in some cases, decades, that were really symbolically and emotionally very important to both School of Ed and Wheelock. And we had some amazing conversations in that first year about how to retain some of each, kind of the best of each, and to build new traditions together, but to honor the prior traditions, so that we wouldn't just, like, you know, cancel culture, right? Like, we would just actually do something new and different, but that brought them together. And so that was my first kind of thought to this question, and it was very human-centered, right? Mm-hmm. Conversations that really let people share what they loved about Wheelock and the School of Ed, and what they wanted to carry forward. So, David, over to you.
So I think I think Cynthia Forrest mentioned in the chat that there was a tremendous amount of grieving that took place once the announcements were made about the planned merger, and that ebbed and flowed. I mean, sometimes we had to be honest about employment opportunities, and people had struggled to see where their next step was going to be. And students, I mean, I remember phone calls from parents, distraught parents who, you know, elected to have their child at Wheelock because of the intimacy of the campus and the history, and that grieving was very real. We met, and you know, some of this was unique, I think, to a place like Wheelock. We met weekly with students and faculty and staff on a kind of office hour basis, where people could come in and just talk. And you know, it would when new news came out, more people might show up at those meetings, and then there would be sort of a few weeks where there wouldn't be very many students or faculty and staff. But sometimes it was just the uncertainty of all of the issues that were ahead of us. Perhaps most days, we only could say we haven't figured that out yet, right? We don't know the answer to that question. We haven't negotiated that point yet with BU. So a lot of it had to be rolled out in a way that was methodical, but to faculty, staff, students and alumni and parents, it felt like it was taking forever to get answers to questions. So, some of it just required a tremendous amount of listening, sometimes a tremendous amount of being dumped on about feelings that people were having, and being patient and understanding the why people were feeling so badly. I think it's nice to hear you say that you found the book to be very human focused. I think the book is about Mary and my experience, not anyone else's. Others could write this book and probably would have a very different tone and regard, but we didn't try to write the book for anybody else. It was for us. So, yeah.
Well, so we've passed the 3rd anniversary now of the creation of the BU Wheelock School and the closure of Wheelock College on June 1st. So now you both have the benefit of hindsight. So here's the question anybody always asks: what would you have done differently, if anything?
So routinely, I get phone calls from presidents across the country. I spoke with the president of Mills College last weekend. Many of you know Mills. It shares a lot of characteristics with Wheelock, and they are deep in the process of trying to figure out their future because they cannot sustain themselves. She asked me the same question when that, if you had to do it again, what might you do differently? I think for me, the answer is probably nothing. But I didn't do everything. I want to be really clear about that. The Board of Trustees met with the faculty at Wheelock a year and a half before I came, to let them know that they were in conversations with other institutions about possible partnerships, which, so that's a level of transparency that very few boards of trustees have with the faculty that they work with. And so, warning shots were, and I've spoken with 2 previous presidents of Wheelock College who told me that they were close to merger decisions in the 1970s, again in the 1990s. Wheelock had a very thin financial margin that it was always working on. And so, I'm not sure I know what I would have done differently. We were very, very fortunate. I should also say, we're located in Boston. If we were located in Des Moines, Iowa, finding a number of potential partners would not have been as easy. Or for that matter, even Western Massachusetts. I noticed I'd like to get to the question in the Q&A about Hampshire eventually, but it is not the same situation in any of these cases. So important to keep that in mind.
I think the one thing I would say, if I had known kind of how challenging emotionally it was going to be, I think I could have been better prepared to deal with the mourning that so many, and the anger and all of the emotions that so many people had. I've always been a problem solver and kind of a fixer of problems. And in retrospect, what I say about that year is that it was not a problem to be fixed. It was a space to be held for people. And that was really new for me because I'm someone who kind of comes in and fixes things and builds new things. And that's not what the situation called for. And it was different for me to sit and hold that space and try to help people transition. That was a muscle I had never really had to develop like this. So in retrospect, I just think knowing that ahead of time, I could have done more in that space. So
Yeah, I can imagine. I have 2 more questions, so folks, please feel free to start adding questions into the Q&A box, and we will start asking those shortly. The book closes with the graduation of the class of 2019 from the new BU Wheelock. What has happened in the college? How has it evolved in the 2 years since the end of the book?
we've built a lot of new things.
Have.
Well, I will say, first of all, the teach out of students who transitioned to BU Wheelock is now almost entirely complete. And of the students who transitioned to BU, 92% have completed their degrees. That is sort of an impressive record, and I think speaks volumes to the effort that BU faculty, staff, and administration have put into the transition. And many of the Wheelock College faculty who transitioned and staff who transitioned have also been an enormous part of supporting that teach out. We also have gone through a tremendous process of establishing a new guide star, a focus for the college. The merger agreement included resources that neither institution had prior to the merger, including new senior faculty, new centers, unrestricted endowment that came with the college, the proceeds of the sale of Wheelock's President's House and one of the residence halls in Brookline, all devoted to the future of Wheelock College at BU. Now we're in the process of finalizing sort of the focus of a strategic plan, building a new relationship with the city of Boston and with the Boston Public Schools, creating new research initiatives, as well as practice initiatives. I could go on, but and retaining a number of programs, our youth justice program, our child life program, and really leading, I think, leading the development of a new undergraduate major that was key to early on to a charge that I was given by the provost office. So a lot of change has happened in the intervening years.
And I think that this brings me back to the 6 proposals from the 6 different institutions that we reviewed. And there were many things that made Boston University's proposal stand out. But for me, as a long time, I've lived in Boston since '89 and lived in Roxbury since '94. I'm a Boston Public Schools mom, parent. My child's been in BPS since he was 4. And I think that the uniqueness of BU's proposal to really use this merger as a way to rededicate itself to the city of Boston, the children of Boston, Boston Public Schools, was really spoke to my value system, at least, and kind of why I am doing the work I'm doing. And we have been able to stay true to that and really double down on the work that we do in Boston and in Boston Public Schools, and really deepening those relationships in individual schools and at the district level, and really, as David said, have the resources to make a real difference in that space. And that feels like really important community engaged work where we can meet people where they are, partner with them, listen to them, have them tell us what they'd like us to do in that partnership, and have the resources to be able to do that, right? I think that that's amazing. And so for me, that's and we've been doing this through institutes and faculty hires and kind of everything David mentioned, but it's really that mission and sticking to that mission of being there for folks has been phenomenal. So
that's great. So my last question, I promise. David, when the transition occurred, you came to BU as the interim dean of BU Wheelock. And this past March, you have moved into the permanent role of dean at BU Wheelock. This is a new role. What are your plans and hopes for the future of BU Wheelock in this permanent position now?
When President Brown and Provost Morrison and I first talked about the possibility of BU being our partner in this merger, I told them that I thought the merger could result in BU having a top 25 college of education in the country. And really, I think being a leader in the region around practice and practice-based research and community-based research. So those are really sort of the big kind of ticket items I'm focused on: hiring a strong, diverse, engaged faculty who want to work closely with the communities of Boston to improve opportunities for children and youth and their families. And all of these things are laid out in our strategic plan. And I think my goal is to get us started in that process. I won't be the dean when the strategic plan ends, but I'm excited to be here at the beginning of it. And yeah, I'll stop there.
Well, we have questions coming in, which is fantastic. I'm going to reference I'll ask the one that Dean Chard referenced from Jason Prentice. Could you comment on Hampshire College, where a collaborative shared governance process kept the college open, in contrast to a top-down trustee and administrator controlled closure of Wheelock?
Yeah, Jason, I wanted to address this because I think it's really important to know that it was not a transparent collaborative shared governance process at Hampshire. The president was fired. The board of trustees devolved during the process. People left the board. It was only subsequent to that the board rallied and hired a new president and had alumni engagement. But the truth is, the shared governance process puts the financial, the fiscal responsibility of any institution, this is law, in the hands of the board of trustees. And so all I can say is that the opportunities in Wheelock's case versus the opportunities in Hampshire's case are very different. The financial landscape for them is maybe very different. And I know as well as I'm sure you do, that there are a lot of deep-pocketed alumni at Hampshire that did not exist at Wheelock. And the question will be whether or not they're able to sustain themselves long-term. We just won't know, right, for a while. So thanks for the question.
Cynthia Forrest, I think your former colleague from Wheelock, asked, as you look back, what are the surprises that emerged?
The one major surprise, I think, and it probably should not have been, but was just how emotional this process would be. And Mary and I both felt it, and we felt it from others. We were reflecting the emotions of faculty, staff, alumni, students, parents. We are often the backstop to those emotions as people express themselves. And I want to not only paint it as a negative emotional picture. I, with some trepidation, went to visit our most generous donor at Wheelock, a person who had given more than $50 million to the college over her lifetime. And her response to me was, what took so long? for this to happen, because I've invested a lot in this college and I knew that this was where we would ultimately end up. How come the decision wasn't made earlier? So, and she was quite pleased with the outcome. So it really, it was just hard to always predict what the emotional responses were going to be. But that for me was probably the biggest surprise.
I think that just in general about surprises, things where there were agreement, kind of what I was talking about, that pinning ceremony conversation, right? That those things went so well in many ways, right? Where we had, post-merger, former Wheelock and former SED faculty have consensus and be simpatico, right? Like they were just really in sync and really had shared values. And that was a seamless, simple process. And then other things where that wasn't the case, prolonged, this is faculty, this is the world of faculty, prolonged conversations over months, sometimes years, without consensus over things that were really important to them. But like the way you teach in my world, sociology 101 or psych 101, right, could be something that you might never come to agreement on. And so I think those were some surprises to see. Some things went really quickly and very much in sync, and others did not. And so you didn't always know which of those were going to go well and which were not. So there were new surprises every day.
I can imagine. A question from Mariana Stoyancheva. Mariana, I'm sorry if I mispronounced your last name. There are a number of institutions of higher learning going through a merger or considering one. What is one key leadership lesson you would like to share that really helped each of you with this effort?
I can start with that one.
Yeah, the smartest thing I ever did was thinking about how to redeploy the leadership team at Wheelock College to handle some of the very, very delicate challenges. Jennifer Rice, who was our vice president for development and alumni relations, became our kind of chief communications person. All communications kind of flowed through her. And she was good at it because she had been communicating with alumni for almost a decade. Cynthia Forrest, who asked a prior question, came on to be our vice president for student affairs. Having someone who was a seasoned student affairs professional who could go to an athletic event and talk to student athletes about their future, who could rally people around for having college fairs so we could help students who didn't want to transition to BU transition elsewhere. I mean, Cynthia was instrumental in that. As Mary and I were making financial and academic decisions, having people like our CFO, Anne-Marie Martirana, these people were incredible, and they didn't walk away from the challenge, right? They stayed. We were very fortunate. I mean, we lost one senior leader who made a really great decision about his future, and he knew that we were going to get Cynthia to come in, who was one of his mentors, and so we didn't miss a beat on the student affairs side. So that was an important leadership lesson, Mariana, was really rethinking how to deploy your team in a way that could manage what was a really complicated year.
And I would say two. One is, kind of like I can read the room, right? Which is, don't assume the culture of the institution. I was new, and so it was really about listening to people. And my background is soc-anthro. And so it's like being an anthropologist on the ground, right? What is the culture of this institution? And what are the values of the people in this institution? And meeting the institution where it is, right? And then also a second part of that is and we write about this in the book, know who the important spokespeople on your campus are, whether those are longtime faculty or trustees or alumni, and take them seriously. You know, meet with them often, listen to them, and know that they care tremendously about the future of the institution and the mission and the people. And you have so much to learn from them. So I think that, to me, is an important leadership lesson, that come in humbly, right? Like, come in to learn and to listen and to respect the positional and organic leadership of the folks on campus.
I'm going to actually combine two questions here, one from Michael Dennehy and one from Shannon Fairley Pittman. They're both asking about the alumni perspective. Can you please describe the merger process from the perspective of alumni engagement, both at SED and Wheelock? And how might alums stay involved in giving back to the BU Wheelock community?
This is another area that is under development. You know, we had a strong alumni relationship at Wheelock because we were small. We had a lot of face-to-face alumni work that was done, and you could do that because of the size of the alumni group. And it was like a lot of small liberal arts institutions. They often had events, face-to-face exposure to one another. And at the former SED, there was less of that. And that's, I think, that won't be a surprise to anyone who's affiliated with BU. That is work that's currently being done at BU, trying to build relationships with alumni that for many decades was not particularly face-to-face and not particularly strong. I think we're beginning to see some exciting developments in this area. We had alumni who wanted to walk away from Wheelock and never talk to us again. In fact, some of them even told us that. And then, you know, a little later, some of them have come to events where we've talked about the new college, and then we've seen bequests built into their wills because they realize that good things are happening, and good things are happening that will contribute to the legacy of Lucy Wheelock and of Wheelock College. We also, not very many people know that there was an alumni endowment fund at the former Wheelock that started from the sale of Lucy Wheelock's, one of her properties in Roxbury. And that became quite a sizable nest egg of support and routinely supported scholarships to Wheelock College, as well as small grants to Wheelock alumni. That group initially was, that group wanted to go on its own and wanted to make some decisions on its own. That was allowed to be done. They are now the Lucy Legacy Fund. They continue to provide strong support. In fact, Shannon Fairley Pittman is one of the leaders of that group. They provide scholarship support to BU Wheelock students, as well as have continued to support Wheelock alumni in their giving. So this will take time. I mean, I suspect a decade from now, we will see stronger relationships with alumni, but that will take a lot of work on my part, on the part of our faculty and staff, and our development our representatives. So more to come on that one.
I just have one thing to add to that, which was, I think different classes of alumni in different decades had very different reactions, right? And so I think the some of the alumni from the classes kind of further out, you know, some of our oldest alumni were far more supportive and understanding than some more recent alumni. And so I think there was definitely folks who had seen what had happened to other institutions over the years and had seen Wheelock change over the years too. And, you know, as David mentioned with the one the one donor who was really wanted to make sure that their support continued in a productive way and in following that mission. So I think they just had a different a perspective than a more recent alum, and I think that we saw that. So there was like a class, like different class level reactions to it, and we had to meet them where they were, and not have just like, oh, this is how alumni are going to respond, because it really was very different. So
we still have a few questions, but we only have a couple of minutes left. I do find one question here interesting, which was about the plans for the Fenway campus. We've talked a lot about the people and the legacy and the mission, but what's going on with the Fenway campus, and what's going on with future plans for that?
Right now we are making an effort to try to move all of the BU Wheelock faculty to one location, which will be the Charles River campus. The university, at this stage, it appears that the Wheelock Family Theater will continue in its current location. The Earl Center for Innovation and Learning is located on the Fenway campus, and a number of other centers and institutes have been relocated there. That's the campus on the Riverway. But I don't think a comprehensive plan has been developed. And in fact, I know that the master plan for former Wheelock was renewed with the city of Boston without a clear decision about how that campus will be used in the future. The Brookline campus, the Hawes Street campus at 43 Hawes, is being used for administrative offices as well as for events and conferences and events plans, events there. And so I think the university intends to continue to engage both campuses. The pandemic has kind of altered that a little bit because it has been used for graduate housing in Peabody Hall, for those of you who remember Peabody Hall, but the campus center was used as a sort of important point for quarantining students during the pandemic, and yeah, and we've had a number of faculty and staff still located there, so that will change in the coming years, I suspect, as well.
Well, we are coming up on time, and I just want to ask you both if there are any last words that you'd like to share about your experience about the book.
I will tell you that I did not want to write this book. Mary will tell you that she had to convince me to do this, and I think partly because this was a very painful process for everyone, including me. And deans of education do not become college presidents by and large. So to find a place where I felt like I could contribute as a leader, and then to 2 years later have to close it. I didn't, and Mary can also tell you that there were occasions where I called her and said, I am in tears again over chapter 8 or whatever it happened to be. And that, you know, I'm not looking for sympathy. I'm just stating a fact. This was an emotional, incredibly emotional process for me and for many, many people involved. And I want to thank everyone who came tonight, particularly those from BU Wheelock who have been through so much of this journey with us. And thank you, Lynette and Mary, for sharing the stage this evening.
Oh, thank you. And it was, you know, I think that we were kind of talked into it, right? You know, and we talk about this in the book. My editor at Inside Higher Ed was like, you have to write about this. This is an amazing story. And unfortunately, it's going to become more and more important for people to see how you did what you did. And then Johns Hopkins, our editor at Johns Hopkins said the same thing, right? Basically, like, we've got to get this out there. And, you know, it has to, people have to know this. So one, they can plan accordingly, but that they can also really try to do the emotional work that's necessary to do this in a way that meets people where they are. And so I'm glad I talked David into it. And it was hard. Oh boy, there were times when both of us were writing that I thought, I just don't know. Like this is a really, because we relived it. And of course, we're at the same time, post-merger at BU building the new college, right? So it's living in two parallel time tracks but I want to thank you, Lynette. Your questions were great. I'm so glad you agreed to do this, and as an important alum and important leader at BU. And thank you to everyone who showed up, really from all kind of former Wheelock, former SED, current Wheelock at School of Ed, and all of our BU colleagues. Really an amazing, supportive environment. Thank you so much.
And thanks to you both, and for writing this book. As hard as it was, I know it's a very compelling story, and it was really just an amazing to be able to read so much about what happened before, the world sort of heard what was happening. So, and again, thank you all to the participants. And I know we didn't get to all of your questions, but we are downloading a transcript and we will follow up with more information. And thank you all again for your attendance. Have a good night.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.